what you expect from networking events. That's why at the end of the webinar, we'll launch a small poll just to have some ideas on how to organize this kind of networking events. So it would be great if you could help us shape this series of events. And well, we have today with us Rashina. I just wanted to introduce her to the audience. Rashina has been working with us for quite some time now as a copywriter. She's a brand messaging consultant and the head of Amplify, which is a creative studio that helps growing brands put out their most powerful message online with story-driven content and creative campaigns. And Rashina is also creator, founder of Club Nomads. That's an online community for creative entrepreneurs to connect, collaborate, and co-work together. And well, we are happy to have Rashina with us today to introduce this series of events and hold a webinar on how to network online as a business owner. So over to you, Rashina, and please, everyone, don't hesitate. This is an interactive format, so share your questions, and you can either unmute yourself or just share your questions, comments in the chat.
Thank you, Judith. I am really excited about this webinar because it's a topic that is just really close to my heart. I think I'm a fairly prolific networker, but probably not in the way that you would expect. So I'm really excited to share my thoughts today. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. So this webinar today is going to be about how to network online as a business owner. So I'll be sharing general networking tips as well. So how to actually build a strong and long-lasting network. But I will also be specifically tailoring this webinar to online because, as we all know, in today's world, that's like a growing priority for business owners. So yeah. As Judith has said, my name is Rashina. I'm the founder of Amplify Copy, and I also very recently created Club Nomads, which is an online community for entrepreneurs to co-work and create things together. I am also, I've been networking for pretty much my entire life. So when I was younger, when I was actually 6 years old, I moved to India from London, and my father was a sales director. And so he would actually bring me into his business meetings, and he set me up with an email when I was 8 years old. And so whenever I would meet any of his connections and really get on with them, he would say to me, "Why don't you send them an email?" And at the time, being 8, I didn't think this was very exciting or interesting, but it actually created a habit in me that I really started to cultivate over many years and has created just this beautiful circle of people that I have in my life at the moment, and a lot of the insights that I'm going to be sharing with you guys today. So in today's agenda, we're going to be covering a quick introduction to networking as a business owner and why it's important, especially in today's society. So post-pandemic, it's become something that is a growing necessity for business owners to connect with other people online. I also want to talk about why it's important to network at all if you're a business owner. We're going to cover a couple of networking mistakes, so things that people do that don't necessarily create strong and lasting connections. A couple of solutions to that, at which point I would like also to hear your thoughts and tips and things that you have found helpful in your own careers. And then I'm also going to discuss a couple of social platforms and communities where you can network online. So let's get stuck in. Networking is something that a lot of us think of as just something really uncomfortable that we don't want to do. So I've spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners about this, and there is this growing perception that networking is this just daunting task that you're meant to do, but you don't really know how to do it or what approach to take. And I just wanted to challenge everyone today to think about it differently. So networking doesn't have to be a chore. It can also be just connecting with people that you think are interesting, meeting new people, having deeper conversations conversations with them and nurturing those relationships through time, and also introducing people that you already know to new people that they don't know already. So I think that even though we tend to have this very fixed idea of what it means to network and to have a network, I would encourage you guys to think about that differently over the course of this webinar and hopefully much later on in your lives as well. So one of the things that I think the pandemic has taught us about networking is actually, because we don't necessarily have access to the people that we usually see in our day-to-day lives, or we can't go and do the normal things that we would do. We wouldn't maybe be able to go to the cafe or go to a restaurant or do any of the things that we're used to doing. This has actually meant that a lot of people are isolated, but we're all unified in our isolation. And so I think this is a really interesting opportunity for us to think differently about relationships and connections. So instead of relying on physical proximity to people that we're used to seeing, actually building our relationships and building our network based on the connection that you have with people versus the convenience or the proximity. I think that's been a clear takeaway from the pandemic, is that the world is actually much smaller than we think that it is. And it's through being isolated that we have discovered that. So the reason that I think that networking is really important for online business owners, so there are so many reasons that I think that this is important, but I'm including a couple here. The first is that it's really important in evolving the way that you do business. So if you're running an e-commerce business, maybe you have a couple of different product lines and you're launching new product lines and new social campaigns and initiatives, it's really important to see that from the perspective of your potential customers and from the perspective of an outsider. So sometimes we get really close to the content that we're creating or the products that we're launching, the design, all of those things, and it becomes really difficult to discern what we have put into it ourselves versus what the market might think or how it might be received. So one of the really great things about networking is it gives you an opportunity to see things through the perspective of other people. So by creating a circle of relationships and friendships with entrepreneurs and business owners who are in similar spaces to you, or even from different industries, you get the opportunity to see things with fresh eyes, and it helps you to evolve the way that you do business. I think that this can be really, really helpful, especially if you live in a location where maybe you're a little bit remote and you don't have access to huge populations and quantities of people. In larger cities, for business owners, there are so many resources and hubs that you can go and, draw strength from. But if you're from a remote part of the world and you don't necessarily have access to that, it is still important to fill that space with connecting with people who can give you that input. So that's one of the things that I think is really important. The other thing is that nobody can do it alone. So when you're growing your business, it's really, I think, in the nature of many entrepreneurs to think, okay, I'm solving this problem. I'm going to create this product to solve it. And I know I can do it. I'm going to just create this thing in the world and that's it. But often what happens on your entrepreneurial journey is you come across new problems that you haven't encountered before, and you realize that you can't solve them yourself. And so a really important part of that process is to actually meet with other people, virtually or otherwise, to work your way around those problems. I think it takes a village to raise a business, and I think that it's always important to welcome new people into that village, because you really can't do it alone, and it's such an important part of the process of product creation, but also the evolution of your brands, to welcome other people into that. I also think that the people that you surround yourself with really matters, both just people who aren't entrepreneurs, but also increasingly people who work with, online businesses. The reason for that is that the people that you have in your life really influence you, because the standards that you hold yourself to and the standards that they hold themselves to impact you one way or another. If you have friends or you have, business buddies that are really going out there and making huge changes in their lives, and of course you're going to be inspired by that and influenced by it in the way that you approach your own business. So for example, if you have an e-commerce business and you're launching a line of beauty products, let's say, and you have friends who are also in the beauty space and they're getting their products into these really big retailers and they're getting orders all over the world from different customers, and different types of clientele, then that also helps you to see that it's possible for yourself. So it's really important to nurture a circle of people who are different to you, but also of a similar wavelength, right? So there is that type of thinking that inspires you to be better. I think sometimes when people become entrepreneurs, their original network is maybe people that they went to school with or people that they met here and there around life. And so it's important to be intentional and also build a network that has fellow entrepreneurs and fellow business owners in it so that you do have that input. I also think that one of the benefits of networking and meeting more people online is that you actually can curate a board of advisors with, opinions that you trust, so that when you are bringing new ideas into the world, you actually have important relationships and people who are there to show up for you. So for example, if you decide to launch a series of events, or you decide that you want to launch a new product line and you need some people to test it with, if you have people within your network and within your close circle who themselves have communities and businesses and customers, then they're more likely to say to you, hey, I really believe in you. I really believe in this new product that you're launching. I'm going to post about it in my community and see if any of my customers want to join your early adopters program or something like that. So I think it's really important to see relationships as these kind of living, breathing things, rather than who can I connect with who might be able to add value immediately. A lot of the time, it's actually through the long term that you see the value of these connections as you're growing together. So we're just going to jump into a couple of the networking mistakes that I've been seeing, and I would really love to see your input on this as well. So I'm just going to quickly check. So one of the first networking mistakes that I have really seen is actually not being yourself in front of new people. I think that there is this perception that networking has to always be very professional, that you have to put yourself forward in your best light. And sometimes that actually gets in the way of creating real, authentic, and meaningful connections with people. Because if you're not representing yourself in a way that actually is true to the person that you are in the world, and for example, the brand that you have created, then it actually creates a barrier between you and the other person. So for example, if you're creating, let's say, a virtual coffee event or joining a networking event, it's really important that you actually tell stories that are important to you versus telling stories that you think that other people are going to resonate with. It's really just one of those increasingly important things, especially with the coronavirus, that relationships are built based on real connection and who you actually are. Because in the absence of being able to go and get a coffee with someone, the lasting relationships are the ones that are built on real connection. The other thing that I've noticed is that there are networkers out there who prioritize volume over depth and meaning. So these are the people that pre-corona were handing out their business cards to everyone at networking events, the kind of people maybe where you're in a conversation with them and they're looking around the room. And that's something I've heard from a lot of people that they've experienced, right? You're talking to someone and they're kind of looking at you, but they're also looking through you at all the other people that they want to talk to. And often in my experience, those don't really create lasting connections, because you aren't really, with that approach, making people feel valued or important. And networking, in my view, is all about really seeing the potential in people, seeing the value in people, and actually communicating that to them, right? It doesn't make you any less. It's actually really important if you want to build a network of really kind of deep connections, that you see the value in those people and you encourage and uplift them through time. So a volume-based approach doesn't necessarily lend itself to that kind of a network. I'd be really interested, by the way, to hear from you guys if you have experienced any of these. So as I'm talking through them, please feel free to pop in one of the numbers if you've experienced any of these yourself. I would just love to see like what your experiences have been so far. So the third thing that I've noticed is actually not feeling worthy enough to even be part of the conversation. So a lot of the time you will everyone has their own social media ecosystem, their own brand ecosystem, and you will be interacting with people, new people all the time. Maybe you're attending a new workshop or an event like this one, and you think that someone has something really interesting to say, but you're too scared to reach out to them because you maybe don't feel that you have anything worthy of input, right? So you don't think you have anything that's important enough to say. And that actually gets in the way of a lot of real connections being formed, because the people that are speaking up, they have been in your position at some point or another. And so often the people that you really want to reach out to, but you're too scared to reach out to, they actually want to hear from you as well. And so what I would really encourage you to think about in this context is, if you're an e-commerce brand and you have, let's say you're launching a line of beauty products or a jewelry brand, for example, and you see other brands out there that are doing something really interesting and that sparks an idea in you, I would really encourage you to actually start a conversation with them and not be held back by those fears of whether you're worthy enough or whether you have valuable input to share. Often those like spur of the moment interactions where you say, hey, I have this idea and I think it could be really valuable for you, those actually create a lot of deep synergy. So it's important to pay attention to those. Also, the other thing that I would suggest is, and this is something that people do quite a lot, is having, let's say, virtual coffees or meetings where in that specific time frame, let's say 30 minutes or 1 hour, you're completely just trying to figure out, okay, what are the synergies? What can we do together? That sometimes works. So sometimes if you're kind of two very focused people and you can really quickly appreciate the value of someone else, then that can be a benefit. But a lot of the time, the real kind of mutually beneficial relationships happen through time and through trying to really understand who is the other person, who are they in the world, what are they trying to achieve, and how can I help with that? And it's really difficult to get that in a 20-minute or a 40-minute conversation. So I would encourage you all to have a more long-term approach to building your circle and building your network. Sometimes you might meet some people who you think, wow, I really like this person. I think what they're doing is amazing, but you don't see an immediate opportunity to collaborate. That's okay. And sometimes that just means it's good to continue the relationship based on liking that person and feeling that synergy. And then if there is an opportunity to collaborate at some point, it will come, but it's important to not force that initially in favor of quick wins. The other thing that I have noticed is people networking because they feel that they should be networking. So it's what they think they should be doing. And I'd like to share a personal example about that from this morning. So I'm part of a lot of Facebook groups and online communities. And sometimes people will add me on Facebook and they won't really say anything. So these are people that I don't know who have found me through a Facebook group, and they will reach out, but then there is like no initial message giving me any context as to why they're reaching out. And so what I always like to do is, if someone reaches out and they're not someone that I know about, I will say to them, hey, what made you reach out? Really nice to meet you. And this morning I actually, and I think this is very timely, I received a reply to one of those messages saying, hey, I'm networking. And I thought this was really interesting because the person had added me without really giving me any context on why they were adding me. And then when I said, hey, like, I'm interested, why did you reach out? They told me that they were networking. And I think this is a very, very good example of this point number 5, which is networking because you feel that you should, but there's no real understanding or purpose behind it. I think that with that person this morning, for example, I could potentially have had a really interesting interaction with her if she had said, hey, I really liked this that I saw in your profile, or I was thinking about this and I wanted to touch base. So sometimes it is really better to be transparent and to say why you're reaching out to someone and what sparked that interest than to just kind of do it for the sake of it. The other thing that I have noticed is that sometimes what happens is, because we feel that we should be putting ourselves out there as business owners and we feel that we should go out there and network, we actually end up following people within our industry or people within our circle who appear to be doing well. And then we feel, okay, maybe I should be following them. But actually those people might not sit well with you, or the things that they're doing maybe aren't really aligned with what you're doing. And what I feel that tends to create over the long run is that you actually create a circle of people who aren't really a reflection of you and your values and your interests, or your business values and business mission and vision. And so what is really important when it comes to networking, in my opinion, is just really trusting your gut feeling about people and brands. If you're an e-commerce business and you want to connect with other e-commerce businesses and you meet someone at an online networking event and it seems to you that they could be a good fit, but you're just kind of not really sure about it, then probably it's better to trust that feeling than to just kind of keep them in your circle whilst having those misgivings, because this is all, networking is about humans at the end of it. It's about humans and connections. And so it's really important to trust your intuition and your gut feeling when it comes to the humans that you choose to keep within your circle. The way that also scales outwards. So I'm going to give the example of a service provider. If you work with clients that you're not happy with, and then those clients actually like working with you, then they will recommend you to other clients that you might not really be very happy with either. So it's important to come from that place of groundedness and being in alignment with the people that you're keeping within your network, because that can actually have a knock-on effect very quickly. Point 7, I think, is a really, really important point, and I can't even emphasize this enough. It's so important to gather the courage within yourself and actually reach out to people that interest you, who are doing interesting things within your industry, who maybe have launched an interesting brand that you'd like to support, and not let that fear of rejection or am I worthy? Do I have meaning to share get in the way? So important to actually get over that hump and say, okay, I'm just going to send them a quick message, or maybe I'll reach out via email, before you let yourself talk yourself out of doing that. One of the final points, which I think is really important as well, is networking PTSD. So I think we've all had pretty terrible experiences with networking at some point or another. Most of the time, it's not really our fault, but I think that sometimes we tend to just let that get in the way of going out there and trying again and putting yourself out there and reaching out to new people, because of all of these, the weight of all of those experiences from the past. And what I would really encourage you to think about is, okay, there might be people out there who you might reach out to who aren't aligned with you and don't reply to your messages. And maybe you have a couple of bad experiences, but the really positive experiences that come from leaving yourself open make it worthwhile. So it's really important to not let that feeling of, oh, what if this turns out to be a really horrible interaction, get in the way of creating opportunity and creating new synergies within your life. I feel that the people that are meant to come into your life do come into your life, but you also have to push yourself to put yourself out there and be visible and be in the places where you might interact with those people, because otherwise you're actually shutting yourself off from opportunity out of fear of either being rejected or having a bad experience. Okay, so I want to hear from you guys. Have you experienced any of these yourselves? If you could put in the chat bar what experiences you have had, maybe by putting in the number, that would be great.
Yeah, we had a couple of participants who have said number 3.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
Also number 7.
Number 7, yeah. So I might actually expand on these then, because I think that these are really important points. I can't actually see the chat bar, so that's why it's actually really helpful for you to
yeah, don't worry.
So number 3, not feeling worthy enough to be part of the conversation. So I think that we can approach that from a couple of different angles, and I have provided some thoughts later on in the webinar. But the first thing is, I think it's important to think, what can you do to feel more worthy of being part of the conversation? And also the other thing that I would say to this is, you never really know until you reach out and talk to people. I would say, think about it in a way like a job interview process. I've always thought about it this way myself. So, back in the day, before you were all entrepreneurs working for yourselves and creating these beautiful businesses, I'm sure some of you would actually apply for jobs with real CVs. And what I always thought about that process was, when you send out a CV to someone, maybe you will send a CV to a couple of different companies that you like. And some companies will respond to you and say, hey, we thought you were amazing. And some will actually not respond, and you'll never hear back from them. But that's okay. And that's actually a gift, because the people that don't see the value in you and don't respond to that and take action on it, maybe you weren't meant to connect with them anyway, or maybe in this scenario, you weren't meant to go and work at that company anyway. And so when it comes to worthiness and feeling like worthy enough to be part of the conversation, I always think it's better to try and put yourself out there. And if someone then reacts in a way that devalues you, to not take it personally, because that person maybe isn't the right fit to be in your network and to be in your life. But that doesn't mean that you should stop yourself from trying, because the people who see the value in you will connect with you immediately, and they will follow up on it themselves as well. So that's one thing that I have always used to help me with that side of things. I also think with worthiness, it's important to just cultivate your inner circle of people and get to the point where you're all cheerleading each other and driving each other forwards. And that will also help to reaffirm that sense that you are a person who's worth being known by other people. I think that it's important to reach out and ask for support. So for example, a couple of my friends who are entrepreneurs are actually at this webinar today. And I said to them, please, I would love if you could join. And that's helping me to also feel more worthy of being here, right? So I think it's important to also ask for help and ask for support and be open about that, because it doesn't make you any less. It doesn't make you any less worthy, any less valuable, but it does make you feel more supported when you're going out there and having new conversations and interactions with people. On point number 7, on point number 7, I think that it's also, so these are all linked, right? The fear of rejection is, I think everyone experiences that. I know of an entrepreneur called Ramit Sethi who always talks about having a rejection folder in your inbox. So in his view, if you're not actually filling up your inbox with a couple of rejections per week, then you're not actually reaching out to enough people. There's also a TED talk, which is quite helpful, which is about, I think it's called 100 Days of Rejection. So that could be a really good one to watch. And that is basically about a man who essentially tasks himself with going out and getting rejected for 100 days so that he then becomes more immune to rejection. And when I watched that TED talk, that really made me feel better about rejection as well, because a lot of the time you stop yourself from doing things that you really want to do and that you would be good at based on just not wanting to have that feeling of rejection. So I would definitely encourage you to think of firstly that the point by Ramit Sethi, and actually task yourself with, okay, how many rejections did I get this week? Have I been reaching out enough? Did anyone say no to me? Because for the amount of no's that you get, if one person says yes and that generates a really beautiful, meaningful connection, then it's worthwhile. So it's really important to see the opportunity and the bigger perspective. And also, I think the 100 Days of Rejection is a good example, because what actually ended up happening to this man was that he taught a class at a really prestigious university. He was on a talk show. So many beautiful things happened just from him trying to get himself rejected and finding that, on the contrary, he was met with acceptance. So I think that's a good one to challenge your thinking as well. Christina, do we have any more input on the chat?
Yeah, we have another person who said number 8.
Yeah, that's an interesting one as well. Yeah. I think that this is a good point as well for people to share their experiences. So if you do have any networking PTSD, feel free to share. This is a safe space. And I think it's important also to realize that a lot of people have gone through this. So whether that's people that you met that have then maybe betrayed you in some way, or devalued you, or made you feel like you were less than, I think everyone goes through those kinds of experiences, and it's important to realize that it's normal, but it doesn't reflect badly on you, and that it shouldn't stop you from actually going out there and trying again, because the people who are meant to be in your life, they're out there, but you do have to go and find them. You can't just like wait for them to fall from the sky. So I would definitely suggest being a little bit more open to that. And I know that it's difficult, but I hope that it's the reassurance to know that a lot of other people go through that too. And it is a process. It's a process of kind of gradually getting to the point where you feel more comfortable putting yourself out there again, especially after networking PTSD. Okay, so in terms of what we can actually do to confront all of these networking mistakes, so the first thing I would really encourage you to think about is actually shifting the way that you view relationships. So I think that from my perspective, one of the things that I've always thought about is that it's really important that the people in my life that I'm actually, that people that I actually care about, that I really value, that I would be happy to introduce to other people and promote and uplift, because that's how much I care about them. So that's the way that I view relationships. And as a result, what I've noticed is, because the relationships that I do keep in my life are very strong and deep relationships, that has scaled outwards to create a network of people that I genuinely care about and value, and the feeling is entirely mutual. So I think that what sometimes happens, what can happen, is that you keep relationships in your life that you're not necessarily sure about. So maybe it's a fellow entrepreneur and you kind of think, okay, I like them, I like what they're doing, but I'm not quite sure about this person. Sometimes that can actually result in, creating a stagnant or kind of a diluted network, because you're essentially keeping these people that you don't actually value within your life. So I would definitely suggest that you rethink all of the relationships in your life and how you view them and how you nurture them and how you show up for them. And that will help you to create a real and authentic set of connections, but also a more authentic network. The other thing I think is really important to remember is that it is an ecosystem. So your network is a reflection of who you are in the world and what you're doing and how you're giving back to the people in your community. I think that is always liable to change through time. And so it's important to be patient with yourself and with others, because everyone is growing at different paces and different rates. And so, who you are right now today might be different from who you're going to be in 2 years' time. But it is important to come from the right place when you are creating new connections with people, so that ecosystem continues to evolve as you go along. One of the things I also would suggest you asking yourself is, how can you actually go about bringing more people into your life that you really resonate with? So if you do find yourself with a network of people who you're not really sure about, or some people you're close to, some people you're not really sure what they're still doing within your space, actually thinking, okay, well, what can I do to bring more people that I really love, that I really am inspired by, into my circle, and how can I add value within their lives? I think it is very much give and take. It's not just, okay, how can I create a synergy with someone and then gain access to that community? I think coming at networking from a place of giving and generosity is always much better than thinking about it in that way. And I also think that it's important to have a more long-term approach to creating your network. It's not about quick wins. It's not about, okay, how can I today profit from this relationship? It's much more about, okay, if I'm going to build my entrepreneurial journey and my business through the next few decades, who do I really want to be on my side helping me through that process? And who do I really want to be adding value to as well? The other thing I would really suggest at this point, and this relates back to some of the points we were talking about earlier, is to actually change the story that you've been telling yourself and about networking. So what I find with a lot of business owners is there are some common excuses that come up, and I wanted to address some of them today. So firstly, I just don't have time to meet new people. That's a really big one that I've had many, many times before. I think that there are various ways around this, but the most important thing is to change your thinking so that you're seeing opportunity rather than objections. So we will address this in a couple of minutes, but the other typical stories that come up are, I don't like showing up on video. Nobody I connect with will be interested in me. So this goes back to being worthy and valuable. And I don't know where to start. So I think for the last one, I don't know where to start. We're kind of giving you some pointers today, thankfully. And for the other ones, it's just important to see it from a more constructive place. So how can I make time, even if I'm quite busy, to connect with new people? How can I feel more comfortable being on video? And if not, are there any alternative platforms I can consider? So if you feel really uncomfortable meeting people virtually on video, there is such a thing as a camera coach. There are people who can help you feel more comfortable on camera. And if you aren't really that comfortable, there are also new emerging platforms like Clubhouse, where you don't even have to be on video to contribute. So it's important to think about it that way. If you really don't feel comfortable, what solutions are there? And if you really want to do something about not feeling comfortable, there is a solution to that too. I also think that for the third point, nobody I connect with will be interested in me. This goes back to the idea of worthiness. And I think it's really important to actually address this, right? So how can I change my perception of the value that I'm bringing to the table? Many years ago, I went to this women's group in London, and there was this very, very old lady. She was about 80 years old, and she would share her teachings with this group. And one of the things that she said was that self-esteem and self-respect comes from achievement. And I didn't really understand it at the time, and it took me quite a long time to understand it. But I think that part of the way that I would really relate that to networking is that your perception of your own value comes through you trying new things. Even if that achievement is you reaching out to someone, that is still an achievement. So trying new things and actually putting yourself out there is going to make you value yourself more, because you're going to try new things and realize that you got through it and that you were able to support yourself through that process. And you might even make some really beautiful relationships along the way. Okay, so I have a couple of tips to share. And again, remember, this is a very interactive session. So if you do have other tips, please feel free to share. In fact, if anyone has some networking tips that they would like to share now, I would encourage you to share it in the chat and we can read through them and maybe have a quick discussion on those.
Yeah, or you can also unmute yourself and propose one tip, something that you would suggest one colleague. I think they want to listen to your tips, Rashina.
Okay. Okay, I will share my tips then.
Okay.
Okay, and if anyone does want to at any point share some tips of their own, please feel free. So first thing is, I think it's really important to be more personal in how you actually reach out to people. The way that you reach out to people can make a really big difference in how that relationship evolves and if it evolves at all. I've reached out to many, many people during my life, literally from age 8, as you all know. And some of those interactions were really just beautiful interactions that scaled over time. So I'm in touch with those people today. And some of those interactions just didn't really go anywhere. I think it's really important to be thoughtful and personal when you're reaching out to new people. So instead of adding maybe 500 new people into your circle on Facebook or on LinkedIn, maybe you want to be more thoughtful and intentional about it. So maybe you add 20 people that you think are really interesting, that you're really inspired by, and then you actually approach them in a way that's more personal. So to the example that I shared of this morning, instead of just adding someone without saying anything and then not following up with them and waiting for them to send you a message, sending them a very short, sweet message initially saying, hey, this is why I'm reaching out to you. I think that whatever you did, maybe it's like this magazine that you have created or this article that you wrote, was really interested and I wanted to reach out. And then following up on that, when they actually, if they accept your request, to say, to reiterate your point, right? To actually build on that and move forward. I think sometimes we get lost in this idea of, okay, I need to increase my network by 500 connections or by 1,000 connections, and you actually lose a lot of quality within that. The other thing to remember is in any one conversation that you have with any person, any new person, you could take the conversation in a million different directions. So it's really important to be intentional about that. If there is a reason you're connecting with them, sometimes it's actually better to be transparent and say, I saw this website that you created, or I saw this article, versus just adding them and not saying anything. And then they don't even know what is the starting point for the discussion. So sometimes framing the discussion, being more intentional and thoughtful about it, can actually go a long way. I also think this is counterintuitive because we're talking about growing your network, but I think it's really important to actually be more supportive of the people who are in your community. So if you can see opportunities for, let's say you're working with a service provider who's really great and you think they do an amazing job, why don't you post a review? Why don't you introduce them to people who maybe could use their help? I think it's really, really important to be more active within your network and uplift people. So instead of having a more passive role in them wondering, why are new connections not coming to me? Where am I going to meet new people? Actually helping the people within your network to meet new people and lifting them up and inspiring them and thinking of them And then that, I think, has a very clear knock-on effect that that is like very beneficial for everyone. The other thing that I think is just so important, I've spoken about it at length before, is to really just listen to your gut and connect with people you're actually interested in and inspired by, especially if you're a business owner, especially if you're having an e-commerce business, right? Because there are so many out there, and there are so many similar brands that you could connect with. It's important to really just focus on the ones that do things that you think are amazing. I think that human beings are so insightful and wise. Sometimes we are wise beyond what we actually consciously know. And so if you are interacting with someone and you feel that they have an ulterior motive, or you feel kind of misaligned with them on some level, then there is usually a reason for that. And I think that it's important to listen to your gut and your intuition, and only really interact with people intentionally, and people who inspire you and uplift you and energize you. Otherwise, you might end up collecting people within your network that you think, oh, I should be following this brand because they appear to be doing something interesting within my industry. But if they don't actually really inspire you, then you're creating a kind of a weaker network. The other thing that I think is so important, and I think it's actually one of the most neglected tips when it comes to networking, is to continually nurture your mind to see opportunities and to create new ideas. So the reason that I think this is important is that if you are reaching out to someone, let's say you have a brand and they also have a brand that's in your space, and you come up with this idea and you say to them, hey, I really love what you're doing here. Why don't we collaborate and we can create something like this? That's much more powerful than just kind of connecting with someone and saying, hey, like, nice to meet you. So sometimes it can be really just kind of a secret weapon in a way to be able to come up with ideas and brainstorm with people. And sometimes even if you don't have an initial idea when reaching out to someone, that's okay too. You can sit down with them and think, hey, is there anything that, is there any way in which we can help each other? I think it is really important to come at this from a very authentic perspective though. So, going back to the point about quick wins earlier, if you don't see an opportunity to immediately work with someone or collaborate with them, then it's better to table it for now and then go back to it later. But if you do have an idea that comes up, then always share it, because those kinds of synergies are really powerful, especially when they come up naturally and are coming from a place of enthusiasm. So for example, I like introducing people to each other quite a lot. And sometimes I've noticed that if I have a conversation with someone and I think, okay, this person really needs to meet this other person because this person's working on a business that is just kind of really well aligned with what this person is doing. If I introduce those two people and I say, I think you should have a conversation about X, Y, Z, bringing my own ideas onto the table, usually that conversation will have a much better outcome and like a stronger relationship develop than if I just put two people together and they have no idea what they're meant to be doing or why I've put them together. So actually being more creative, nurturing your mind to come up with new ideas is really important, because you can play a more active role in generating value both within new conversations and also existing relationships. I also think that remembering to follow up is so important. So not seeing it as a task or a duty, but actually reaching out to people and circling back with them. I have heard from a couple of my entrepreneur friends that this is something that they struggle with, as they feel that maybe they're pestering someone by reaching out to them again and following up with them. But I actually think it's a really important point. And the people who really value you, value your brand, value your business, and want to take the relationship further will appreciate that you reached out to them again, and they will actually thank you for doing so. So it's important to remember to follow up and not feel ashamed about it, not feel that you're inconveniencing the other person, but just do it in a way that is thoughtful and, non-intrusive. Do we have any comments so far, by the way?
Yeah, there is one of the participants who said that starting a community is one of the silent ways to network and gain credibility and attention. And this is really, really true, especially if you also, as this person was saying, you also post questions, share other tips, and you're helpful with your network. That also encourages you to have a very good network and be a valuable resource for others as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really amazing tip, and I don't think that we included it. So I'm very pleased that whoever has shared that did share. I think it is so important to take a more active role, and some people feel comfortable by just being more active participants within their community, and other people create their own communities. And I think that creating community can have such an amazing impact on everyone, because not only are you actively inviting other people to speak up and uplifting people around you and creating a safe space for them to all regroup together, but it also is really important for entrepreneurs to see other entrepreneurs stepping up and leading the way, and being more proactive, because that encourages other people to do the same. So it has a knock-on effect within your community. If you decide all of a sudden, okay, I'm going to build a community, then all of the people in your circle on some level are going to be impacted by that in a positive way, because they will also be encouraged to take a more active role within their network. So it's a really important point. I'm really glad that was mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. We also have a question from Falguni. I don't know if you want to unmute yourself, and yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey Rashina.
Hi.
Namaste.
Nice to meet you. Namaste.
So my question is it possible to build more ethical platforms that support local development instead of being based on an extractive model while still operating on a global scale?
I don't know if this is a networking question.
It's how do you link it to this networking component, Falguni?
Pardon?
Yes, how do you I have an issue about understanding the question. I don't really know how it's linked to the networking component. Could you develop it a bit more?
Actually, nowadays, if you will make development in local level, that will be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Means instead of extractive model, if you will do something develop in local level, it will be a great thing.
So
I think the idea here is, well, Falguni is asking for tips on platforms that are like pushing the local networking more than just like, I guess, LinkedIn and the ones where it's focused on the local component of
Local
networking.
level.
Okay, so if that is the question, then we do actually have some ideas for you, Falguni. So the first thing is that, so Ecom Connect, we're going to be hosting a series of networking events. And so you might actually be able to meet more e-commerce entrepreneurs within your region through those events. That's like, they're going to be really great events. And it will make it much easier for you to meet local entrepreneurs. The other thing I would suggest is joining groups that are actually local to your vicinity. So even though Facebook, LinkedIn, that's all very broad, usually you will find groups of entrepreneurs. So for example, in London, they have a London group of startups, and they even have specific groups for specific regions in London. And so I know London is a very big city, so it's probably not the greatest example. But if you research online groups within your vicinity, I think you'll find that there are some groups for either entrepreneurs or people within your region who want to network together. And it could be that the groups aren't specifically for networking, they're just communities that people have built, but those are good places to meet new people. Do we have any more questions?
No, we can continue.
Okay, please do feel free to ask questions, everyone. I'm going to continue on this. So the other point I wanted to talk about was working on worthiness. So this came up several times during this webinar, and I think that it is just a really important point. So actually expanding your level of thinking and thinking, okay, if I don't feel worthy, what can I do so that I feel more confident or more comfortable? So there are people, for example, who have joined Toastmasters International, which is a group for speaking and public speaking in particular, to feel more confident speaking up or, meeting new people, interacting interacting with new people, there are various different options available. So like we mentioned earlier, video, if you don't feel confident on video, which I think a lot of people do struggle with, there are people who do camera coaching, and there are communities that help you to show up on video in a way that you feel more comfortable with. So worthiness can take many different forms. I think it's important to identify what specific facet of unworthiness you are experiencing, and then try and find solutions that are adapted to that. Because sometimes, it's not always the things that you expect that are affecting your ability to network and create deeper and more meaningful connections with people. Sometimes, for example, if you've had friendships or business relationships that have taken a turn for the worse, that can then impact your ability to trust new connections with new people. So it's important to just kind of observe yourself and think about things at a deeper level to try and understand why you feel the way that you do, and then take positive action to address that. Okay, now we're going to talk about where to network online. So Falguni, I hope that this will be helpful to you as well. So there are a couple of different platforms that you can use. These are all the traditional platforms, but I think that there are ways to do it. So Quora, I think, is a very underappreciated platform. The reason I think that is because it's essentially kind of a Q&A platform. So you can go onto the platform and share answers to questions that people have asked. And what that does is it creates a very natural sense of networking, because when people have very interesting answers that they've shared, usually you will follow them based on what value they're adding. So it's a great way to network, because you're actually doing it based on what people have to say versus their title or their, them appearing successful. Clubhouse is also a really great place to meet people. So it's currently only open to Apple users. So I think it's worth waiting a couple of months before joining if you're an Android user. But Clubhouse is a really great place, like Quora, to meet people based on their interests, based on what they have to share, the meaning that they're sharing, the value that they're sharing, versus taking them at face value. It's just kind of a way to deepen the relationship before even taking it a step further. So for example, on Clubhouse, and this is essentially a platform where you can put yourself into a virtual room with someone and share topics of conversation or things that you're interested in, and respond to questions as part of a discussion. So it's essentially voice note only. And what's really great about that is if you hear someone who has something really interesting to say that you really connect with, you can then go and follow them on Instagram or follow them on LinkedIn and build the connection outside of the platform, but always based on the mutual interest and that feeling of, oh, I really resonate with this person. So that's something I would suggest keeping your eye out for. Facebook groups are also a really great place to get to know people. And I would suggest not necessarily targeting networking-based Facebook groups, but more Facebook groups that are based on things that you enjoy or things that you have in common with other people. So for example, I know that the ITC has a Women in E-commerce Facebook group that's really great. There are also Facebook groups to do with sustainable trade. There are Facebook groups to do with, entrepreneurs being in Europe, entrepreneurs in Latin America. So it's really important to just choose groups that you feel safe in, where you feel that the people that are within the groups are actually really interesting people that you resonate with, and then build outwards from there. So then maybe if you see someone posting with a question or asking for advice, actually being a more active participant within those groups. I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is just becoming a more active participant within your network scales outward at every level. If you are actively contributing to the lives of the people around you, chances are when you join a Facebook group or you join a community online, you're probably going to be a little bit more readily prepared and willing to be an active participant within those communities too. So I'd really suggest rethinking your approach and just kind of building up that level of courage and willingness to put yourself out there and share value. Instagram is also a great place to meet fellow brands that you like. And I would suggest, if you find a brand that you think are doing something amazing, reach out to them. And sometimes that can actually lead to virtual coffees and conversations and synergies. I think with LinkedIn, it's kind of more one-on-one based. I would suggest actually reaching out to people on a one-on-one basis versus with LinkedIn groups, because LinkedIn groups it didn't really take off. So I would say LinkedIn, it's probably better to just link up with people that you think are really interesting based on what you've seen of them so far. And Facebook is kind of like a double-edged sword in some ways. Some people feel that it's much much better kept for personal uses. But I would suggest within the context of Facebook groups, if you meet someone in a Facebook group that you think is really interesting, you can add them, but always feel free to do it with a little bit more meaning and personality versus just adding someone and not telling them why. Another place is actually online communities, masterminds, programs. So this is something that a lot of business owners benefit from, is actually coaching groups, masterminds, communities, and memberships. They can be a really great place to meet people who are kind of on the same level of you in terms of the way that you're thinking or your interests, or even your geographical location. So it depends on the group and the community. But I do think it's good to keep your eye out for entrepreneurs who are leading their own communities, who are creating memberships, who are creating programs, because often that can be a really great way to meet like-minded people who resonate with similar topics that you resonate with. Maybe it's ethical trade, maybe it's to do with launching a clothing brand. There are so many different kinds of communities based on whatever the common objective is. And I think it can be a really great place to find people that are like-minded. In terms of how to use these platforms, I think it's always important to be a good representation of who you actually are. So one way I would suggest seeing this is through the prism of branding. A brand is meant to essentially represent the person behind it, if it's a personal brand, that is. And so what sometimes happens is people have a misalignment between their brand and who they actually are. So online, they're showing up as a certain person, but then when you actually meet them in person or you meet them over a virtual coffee, you think that something is amiss because there isn't really that alignment. So what I would suggest when it comes to actually showing up on these platforms is really being yourself, being personal, being an accurate representation of the person that you are, so that when that then evolves into relationships and connections, they are a representation of who you are and the kinds of relationships that you would like to develop. I would also suggest getting to know people on a one-on-one basis. So actually taking the time out of your schedule to meet new people, create new connections, and stay in touch with them on an ongoing basis. I think that that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily think to do or think that they have the time to do. So sometimes it's a matter of actually finding that space and that time, even if it's, let's say you're going for a walk or you're listening to a podcast in the morning, just finding a little bit of extra time to connect with people can always go a long way. Sharing value, thoughts, and insights can be a great way to do this as well. So if you have thoughts to share within the communities that you're part of, I would suggest already going and being an active contributor as part of those communities. And then people who really resonate with what you said will come and comment on your posts and kind of engage in that conversation with you. I have two more points to talk about here, but I was just wondering, does anyone else have any thoughts or any questions?
Rashina, we have to close very soon.
Oh.
It's 4, and we would like to launch the poll soon. So maybe you can just summarize your last points.
Okay. So in terms of the key takeaways, I would just say that networking is a very continual process. It's all about nurturing relationships through time. So it's really important to come at that from a place of authenticity and generosity and really lead your network in a way that is more intentional. I would suggest really practicing contacting new people based on the conversation we've had in this webinar, and like building up the courage to reach out to people that interest you, and also just developing that as a habit, I think, is a really important thing moving forward. The other thing is just making an effort to join platforms where you feel comfortable being yourself and you really like the people that are part of those communities. And we've shared a couple of examples of that, but I would definitely suggest after this webinar, going back to your current existing platforms and just doing a little bit of curation and seeing where could I be maybe being more present and what is no longer aligned with me. Perfect.
Thank you so much, Rashina. Now we wanted to let you know, before giving you the floor for questions, we have prepared also a series of events which are called Network with the Community. And here what we want to do is virtual speed networking. We want to connect you with other professionals to create new exciting collaborations. And why do we think this is important right now? Because, well, during this situation where we are all connecting virtually all the time, it's still very important to make relevant and personal and professional connections with others in a relaxed atmosphere where you feel comfortable, where you put in practice the different tips that Rashina has explained right now, and other tips will come up with to help you network. And it's also an opportunity for you to get inspired, to share your ideas and also your challenges so that we can help each other and learn from others. So also to be able to customize these future sessions a bit more and to make them the best of them for you, we would like to launch a very short poll here. It will take you 1 minute to answer the questions, and it will be great for us to see what you would like us to do in the future. So I'm gonna launch it now, and please answer it so that we can make the best of our sessions in the future. Perfect. We already got some answers. And I saw that you were asking if we were gonna share the materials. Yes, we'll share the presentation and the recording of the session so that you can rewatch it and also share it with your network. And also, well, as you know, you're part of Ecom Connect, and that's a platform not only to share resources, but also to network. That's one of the main goals of the platform. And in the platform, you have an option to send direct messages to members. I'm sure you have already used it. And also there's a tab with the company's profiles that you can fill in, because it makes it easier for other members to look for potential collaborations. And there's also a tab with all the members, and you can do a research filtering by keywords in case, I don't know, you're looking for someone who works in, let's say, who has experience in Google Analytics and you need someone for your team. You can research it there, and it's like a mini LinkedIn. So we also encourage you to use the platform. Okay, great.
And
so
maybe, Chris, just to add to what you said about the private messaging, you can also use this functionality to reach out to us, to the ITC Connect team, because I see that I think Muna Musi said that he actually wanted to share some other challenges that he faced when networking. So that would be great if you could just reach out to us by private chat on Ecom Connect and let us know about your challenges so that we can take them into account when organizing the next speed networking events.
Yeah.
So please really make use of this functionality on Ecom Connect. That would be very helpful.
Perfect. Yeah. So let me enter Poland. We got good answers from everyone. Thank you. So, well, if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and we'll answer a few ones quickly because we ran out of time. So if there is a question, please let us know. If not, you can, of course, ask them on Ecom Connect, and we'll be happy to answer them and to put all the questions into practice in the next sessions. No questions. Well, thanks a lot, Rashina. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Pleasure. Thank you
Yes.
everyone for being here.
Really great, very good messages on the chat. So I guess everyone is quite happy. So thank you very much. And see you soon. Stay up to date with the news on Ecom Connect, and happy to connect with you all soon. Ciao.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Thanks, Rashina.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.